Stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, before you ignore this message like so many others, take a breath and listen carefully. This may not be an accident. There are moments in life when something appears suddenly, unexpectedly, almost mysteriously. A message, a sign, a feeling that something important is trying to reach you. And many times, people ignore it. They close the message. They keep scrolling. They tell themselves it's nothing. But what if this moment is different? What if this is one of those rare moments where heaven is trying to get your attention? Because today, there is something unusual happening around your life. Something that has been unfolding quietly, behind the scenes, long before you even realized it. According to what has been revealed, a wealthy family, people with influence, resources, and power, has been trying to reach you, not someone else. You. And the strange part is this: they didn't find you randomly. Your name surfaced for a reason. Your story crossed their path in a way that even they could not fully explain at first. But what makes this situation even more mysterious is that the timing of this message aligns with something spiritual. Moments like this are not just about money. They are about destiny, about doors that appear suddenly, about opportunities that many people miss because they hesitate, doubt, or simply refuse to pay attention. And right now there is a warning attached to this moment. Because sometimes when something important tries to reach you, the window of opportunity is small, very small. And if the moment passes, it may never return the same way again. This is why you are here right now, not by coincidence, but because something about this message caught your attention. Maybe curiosity, maybe intuition, or maybe something deeper inside you whispered, "Pay attention." So stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear could change the way you see this moment in your life. And it all begins with something very unusual. A message that appeared when you least expected it. Chapter 1. The message you were never supposed to ignore. Imagine receiving a message that seems ordinary at first. It arrives like any other notification. Quiet, simple, almost easy to ignore. But hidden inside that message is something that could change everything. This is how many life-changing moments begin. Not with loud announcements, not with dramatic signs, but with something subtle, almost invisible, that only a few people stop long enough to notice. Some believe that destiny always arrives with noise, but the truth is different. Many times, destiny arrives quietly, and the difference between the people who move forward and the people who stay where they are often comes down to one small decision: whether they open the message or ignore it. Right now, you may be wondering how something like this could even happen. How could a millionaire family, people who likely have endless connections and opportunities, suddenly be searching for someone like you? The answer lies in something that many people overlook. Life is full of unexpected connections. Paths cross. Stories intersect. And sometimes, someone far away becomes aware of your name, your situation, or something connected to your life. In some cases, it happens through a recommendation. In others, through a story that reaches the right ears. And sometimes, through circumstances that feel almost impossible to explain. But what matters most is not just that your name appeared. What matters is what happened after that. Because once your name entered the conversation of this family, something unusual occurred. Interest, curiosity, questions. They began to ask, who is this person? What is their story? Where are they now? At first, it may have seemed like nothing more than a passing curiosity. But sometimes curiosity turns into something more. Something meaningful. Something important. Because people with resources often look for opportunities to help, invest, or change someone's path. Not always for fame. Not always for recognition. But sometimes because they believe they have been placed in a position where they can make a difference. And according to what has been revealed, this family began trying to establish contact. Not once, but more than once. However, something unexpected happened. The message did not reach you immediately. There were delays, confusion, even obstacles. And this is where the situation becomes even more mysterious. Because some believe that whenever something important is about to enter your life, there are forces, distractions, doubts, fears that try to pull your attention away. Think about it. How many opportunities have people missed simply because they assumed something was not important? A call they didn't answer, an email they didn't open, a message they thought was irrelevant. And later they discovered that the moment they ignored could have changed everything. Right now, you stand at a similar crossroads, not because someone is forcing you, but because you have been presented with information, a possibility, a moment that asks for one simple thing: attention. Because when something significant is trying to reach you, ignoring it is often the easiest mistake to make. But paying attention, that is where the story begins to change. And what you are about to hear next may explain why this message is appearing now, and why the timing may not be accidental at all. Sometimes God places certain messages in front of us at the exact moment we are ready to receive them. And if you feel that something in this message is speaking directly to your heart, I want you to know something important. There is a special gift that has been prepared for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a small guide called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. This is not just information. Many people have described it as a spiritual awakening about money, purpose, and divine provision. If this message resonated with you, take a moment later and open the first pinned comment. You will also see a way to enter a more reserved space of this channel, where I share messages that are not public, reflections that are only available to those who choose to walk closer on the spiritual path. Everything is waiting for you in the first pinned comment. Sometimes blessings begin with knowledge that arrives at the right moment. And today, something has been quietly placed within your reach. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a message titled 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many who opened it said they felt like they had discovered a spiritual perspective on prosperity that changed the way they see money and purpose. If you feel guided, take a moment later to open the first pinned comment and receive it. You will also notice an invitation to join a closer circle of this community, where certain spiritual messages and teachings are shared only with members. Some people feel called to stay in the public space. Others feel ready to walk a little closer on the path. If that speaks to you, everything is waiting in the first pinned comment. Why God is urging you to open this now. There are moments in life when timing becomes everything. Not tomorrow, not next month, not someday when things calm down, but now. And throughout history, many people who later experienced dramatic changes in their lives said the same thing about the moment that started it all. It happened suddenly, unexpectedly, at a time when they almost ignored it. The truth is that divine timing rarely waits for perfect conditions. God does not always wait until everything around you is calm, organized, and predictable. Instead, important moments often arrive when life still feels uncertain, when you are still asking questions, when you are still searching for direction. And that is why this message carries a sense of urgency, not because of fear, but because opportunities connected to destiny often appear through small windows of time. When that window opens, something inside you feels a quiet pull, a whisper that says, "Pay attention." Many people describe this feeling as intuition. Others call it spiritual discernment. But whatever name you give it, the experience is the same. A moment appears in front of you, and deep inside you feel that this moment matters. Yet at the same time, another voice appears. A voice of doubt. A voice that says, "This is probably nothing. Maybe later. It's not important." And many people listen to that voice. They delay. They postpone. They move on, only to discover later that what they ignored was something far more significant than they realized. But right now, something different is happening, because this message has reached you at a moment when you are actually listening. You did not scroll past it. You did not dismiss it immediately. Something inside you chose to stay. And sometimes, that small decision is the beginning of a much larger shift. You see, there is a pattern that appears again and again in the stories of people who experience unexpected breakthroughs. Before the change happens, there is almost always a moment of awareness, a moment where something catches their attention. A message, a conversation, a piece of information, a realization. It feels small at first, but later they look back and realize that this moment was actually the doorway. And that is why the urgency exists now. Because when something meaningful is trying to reach you, ignoring it does not make it disappear. It only means the opportunity may move on. Imagine someone knocking at a door. They knock once. They wait. Maybe they knock again. But eventually, if no one answers, they assume the house is empty, and they walk away. Opportunities work in a similar way. They appear, they knock, they wait for a response, and when a response does not come, they continue on their path. But the fact that you are here means something interesting may already be happening. You heard the knock, even if you are still unsure what it means, even if you are still questioning whether this moment is truly important, you heard it. And sometimes that is enough to begin something new. Because awareness changes everything. The moment you become aware of a possibility, your mind begins to see things differently. You start noticing details you previously ignored. You start asking questions you never asked before. You start realizing that perhaps the path in front of you is not as fixed as you once believed. And that is where faith begins to play its role. Faith is not blind belief. Faith is the willingness to stay open when something meaningful might be unfolding. It is the courage to pause and consider that maybe, just maybe, life is guiding you towards something you did not expect. And in this case, the unexpected element is clear. A family with wealth and influence has shown interest in reaching you, not through coincidence alone, but through circumstances that brought your name into their awareness. But the real question is not simply why they noticed you. The deeper question is this: why is this information appearing in your life right now? Why today? Why at this moment in your journey? Some would say it is random. Others would say it is simply the result of ordinary events aligning. But those who believe in divine timing often see something else entirely. They believe that certain moments appear precisely when you are ready to notice them. Not earlier, not later, but exactly when the awareness can finally reach you. And if that is true, then this moment may not be about wealth alone. It may be about something deeper. It may be about a shift in how you see your own future. Because sometimes the greatest transformation begins with a simple realization that the story you thought was already written may still have unexpected chapters waiting to unfold. And the next chapter of this story becomes even more intriguing. Because once this family became aware of your name, they began asking questions that led them closer and closer to you. Questions that eventually revealed a connection no one expected to find. And that is exactly what we will explore next. But before we continue, remember something important. Sometimes the most meaningful opportunities in life begin with nothing more than a message you almost ignored. The millionaire family that has been looking for you. Sometimes the most unexpected stories begin far away from the person who will eventually be at the center of them. Long before you heard anything about this moment, long before this message reached your ears, conversations were already taking place, in a different environment, among people whose lives move in very different circles. A family known for their wealth. A family whose name carries influence in places where decisions are made quietly but powerfully. Families like this often live in a world that most people never see. Their days are filled with meetings, investments, foundations, projects, and responsibilities that stretch across cities and even countries. Their names appear in places most people never look. And yet, even in circles like these, something interesting can happen. A single name can appear where no one expected it. A story can surface. A recommendation can be mentioned in passing. And suddenly, curiosity begins to grow. That is how many unexpected connections begin. Not with a grand announcement, but with a small question asked during an ordinary conversation. Who is this person? At first, the mention of your name may have seemed like nothing more than a detail, a passing curiosity. But curiosity has a strange way of expanding, because once a question is asked, more questions tend to follow. Someone begins to search. Someone looks deeper. Someone wonders whether there is more to the story than what first appeared. And according to what has been revealed, that is exactly what happened. Your name was mentioned, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to spark interest. And when people with resources become curious, they have the ability to investigate quickly. Information begins to move, connections are checked, stories are examined, backgrounds are explored, not because they were suspicious, but because they wanted to understand. Who is this person? Where are they now? What path has their life taken? At first, the answers may have seemed ordinary. A life with its own struggles, its own victories, moments of uncertainty, moments of resilience. A path that looked, on the surface, like the path of millions of others. But sometimes, when people look closely enough, they begin to notice something deeper: patterns, character, potential, and in some rare cases, purpose. People who have achieved great wealth often develop a different way of seeing the world. They understand that opportunities can appear in unexpected places. They understand that sometimes the most powerful stories begin with people who never expected their lives to change. And that understanding is what led this family to look closer. But what they discovered surprised even them. Because the deeper they looked into your story, the more they realized that something unusual connected their world to yours. Not through coincidence alone, but through circumstances that had quietly formed over time. Sometimes connections like this come through past relationships. Sometimes through someone who once crossed paths with you. Sometimes through events that seemed small when they happened, but later revealed a deeper meaning. And when that realization appeared, their curiosity grew stronger. Because suddenly, your name was no longer just a name. It became a possibility. And possibilities attract attention, especially when they appear unexpectedly. But something else also happened during this process. A question began to form in their minds. A question that changed the direction of the entire situation. What if this connection was not random? What if there was a reason your name appeared when it did? What if something greater was quietly aligning events in a way that no one had planned? These are the kinds of questions that people rarely speak about openly. But behind closed doors, in moments of reflection, they do arise. And when they arise, people begin to act differently. They become more attentive, more careful, more intentional about the next step. That is when the idea of reaching out began to appear. At first, it was only a thought. Then it became a conversation. Then a decision. We should try to contact this person. But this is where the story becomes even more intriguing. Because reaching you turned out to be more difficult than they expected. Messages moved slowly. Information took time to travel. Paths that seemed simple suddenly became complicated. And moments like this often raise an interesting question. Why do obstacles appear when something important is trying to happen? Some people believe it is coincidence. Others believe it is simply the natural friction of life. But many people who have experienced life-changing moments say something different. They say that when a door connected to destiny begins to open, distractions and delays often appear around it. Not to stop the moment completely, but to test whether the moment will be recognized. And that brings us to where you are now. Because after all the searching, all the questions, all the attempts to move closer to contact, this message has finally reached you. Not by force, not by pressure, but simply by awareness. You now know that somewhere, a family with resources and influence has shown interest in connecting with you. That alone may feel surprising, maybe even difficult to believe. But sometimes the most surprising opportunities begin exactly this way, with a realization that something unexpected is unfolding. And the deeper truth behind this situation is something we will explore next. Because as they continued looking into your story, they discovered something even more surprising. A connection that had existed long before anyone realized it. A connection that may explain why your name appeared at exactly this moment. But before we move forward, take a moment to reflect on something important. Sometimes when messages like this appear, they are not only meant to inform you, they are meant to prepare you. Prepare your mind, prepare your attention, prepare your awareness for what may be coming next. A quiet invitation before we continue. If something in this message is speaking to your heart, there is something I want you to know. In the first pinned comment, there is a guide that was shared with this community called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity, According to God's Plan. Many people who opened it said they felt like they discovered a spiritual perspective about prosperity that they had never heard explained before. Think of it not as a book, but as a message that was made available for those who feel ready to receive it. You will also notice, in that same first pinned comment, an invitation to enter a more exclusive space of this channel. A place where I share messages, reflections, and spiritual insights that are not posted publicly. Some people remain here in the open community. Others feel called to walk a little closer on this spiritual journey. If your heart feels curious, simply take a moment later and look at the first pinned comment. Everything is waiting for you there. The hidden connection between you and their wealth. Sometimes the most important connections in life are not obvious at first. They are not written clearly on the surface. They are hidden inside events that seem small when they happened, moments that passed without anyone realizing their future significance. And that is exactly what began to appear when this family continued looking deeper into the story connected to your name. At first, they expected to find nothing unusual. Just another ordinary life, another ordinary path. But the more details they uncovered, the more something unexpected began to emerge. A pattern, a thread, a connection that had quietly existed long before anyone recognized it. It did not appear suddenly. It had been forming over time. Sometimes connections like this come from someone you once crossed paths with. A teacher, a mentor, a distant relative, a friend of a friend. Someone who remembered something about you long after you had forgotten the moment ever happened. Other times, the connection appears through events that seemed insignificant at the time. A conversation, a recommendation, a story someone once shared about you. A moment where your character, your resilience, or your kindness left a deeper impression than you realized. People often underestimate how powerful those small moments can be. Because while you may move on quickly from them, someone else may remember them for years. And sometimes those memories travel. They pass from one person to another, from one conversation to another, until eventually they arrive in places you never expected. That is how many doors begin to open. Not through dramatic events, but through quiet reputations that grow slowly over time. And according to what has been discovered, something similar may have happened in your case. Somewhere along your journey, your name became connected to a story that carried weight. Perhaps someone spoke about your perseverance. Perhaps someone mentioned your integrity. Perhaps someone shared something about the way you handled a difficult situation. Whatever the origin was, that story eventually reached ears connected to this family. At first, it may have sounded like nothing more than an interesting detail, but as they looked closer, they began to see something else. A rare quality. The kind of quality that cannot be bought. The kind of quality that cannot be manufactured. Character. People who manage large amounts of wealth often become extremely careful about who they trust. They have seen too many situations where money alone attracted the wrong intentions. So when they encounter someone whose story reflects authenticity, resilience, and sincerity, it stands out. It becomes memorable. And that is what slowly turned curiosity into genuine interest. But there was something even more surprising waiting to be discovered. Because while examining the details around your story, they noticed that certain events in your life seemed strangely aligned with moments in their own history. Not identical events, but moments that carried similar themes. Moments of loss, moments of rebuilding, moments where faith, determination, or perseverance played an important role. And sometimes when people recognize those parallels, something powerful happens. They begin to feel a sense of connection, not because they have lived the same life, but because they understand the journey behind the life. And understanding creates empathy. Empathy creates trust, and trust opens doors. Slowly, the idea that once felt distant began to feel more real. What if there truly was a reason this connection appeared? What if the story unfolding was not simply coincidence? What if something larger was quietly aligning paths that were never expected to cross? Questions like these often appear when people begin to feel that a situation carries deeper meaning. Even people who are normally very practical begin to wonder, because sometimes life produces moments that logic alone cannot fully explain. Moments where timing feels too precise. Moments where separate paths seem to move toward the same intersection. And when those moments appear, many people begin to ask a spiritual question. Is this divine timing? Is this something guided by a purpose greater than chance? No one can always answer those questions immediately, but what matters is what people choose to do next. And in this case, the curiosity and interest that had been growing quietly reached a new level. Because once the connection became clearer, the possibility of reaching out no longer felt like a random idea. It began to feel intentional, something worth exploring, something worth pursuing. But even with that realization, something still had to happen before the next step could occur. A sign, a confirmation, something that would tell them the moment to act had arrived. And strangely enough, around that same time, something unusual was also happening in your life. Small signs, small changes. Moments that may have seemed insignificant when they occurred, But when viewed from a distance, they begin to look like pieces of a larger picture. And those signs may have been preparing you for this very moment, which is exactly what we will explore next. Because before this message ever reached you, there were already signs appearing around your life. Signs that many people overlook until they finally understand what they meant. But before we continue, take a moment to remember something important. Sometimes the most meaningful connections in life were forming long before we became aware of them. And sometimes, what feels like a sudden opportunity is actually the result of a path that has been quietly unfolding for years. A quiet invitation before the next chapter. If something in this message resonates with you deeply, there is something I want you to know. In the first pinned comment, there is a guide that has been made available for this community called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity, According to God's Plan. Many people who opened it said it helped them understand how faith, wisdom, and financial prosperity can walk together according to God's purpose. Think of it as a message that was separated for those who feel ready to receive it. You will also find, in that same first pinned comment, an invitation to enter a more exclusive space of this channel. In that space, I share messages, spiritual reflections, and guidance that are not released publicly. Some people feel comfortable staying here in the open community. Others feel a calling to walk a little closer on this spiritual journey. If that speaks to you, simply take a moment later to look at the first pinned comment. Everything is waiting there for you. The sign God sent before this message appeared. Many people believe that life-changing moments arrive suddenly. One day everything is normal, and the next day everything is different. But when people later reflect on those moments, they often realize something surprising. The change did not actually begin on the day the opportunity appeared. It began earlier. Sometimes days earlier, sometimes months earlier, sometimes even years earlier. Because before major shifts happen, there are often signs. Small signals, quiet hints, moments that seem ordinary while they are happening but later reveal that something deeper was already unfolding. And if you pause for a moment and think about your recent experiences, you might begin to notice something interesting. Have there been moments lately that felt unusual? Perhaps a sudden feeling that something in your life was about to change. Perhaps a growing sense that your current situation was only temporary. Perhaps a quiet voice inside you saying, something is coming. People often dismiss those feelings. They tell themselves it is just imagination, just emotion, just a passing thought. But spiritual traditions around the world have always spoken about these moments. Moments when God begins preparing someone for a shift in their path, not with loud announcements, but with gentle nudges, a conversation that appears at the right moment, a message that catches your attention, a dream that stays in your mind longer than usual, a sudden awareness that your life may be moving toward a new chapter. These signs rarely make sense immediately. Only later, when the full picture becomes visible, do people begin to understand them. Think about the stories of people who experienced dramatic changes in their lives. Entrepreneurs who built successful companies. Families who rebuilt their lives after hardship. Individuals who suddenly found themselves in positions they never expected. When they look back, they often say the same thing. The signs were already there. But at the time, they did not fully recognize them. Because when you are living inside the moment, it is difficult to see the larger design. You only see the pieces. You do not yet see how they connect. And that may be exactly where you are right now. Standing inside a moment where the pieces are still forming. Perhaps there have been small frustrations in your life recently. Moments where doors seemed closed. Situations where things did not move the way you expected. Sometimes people interpret those moments as failures, but sometimes they are simply redirections. Because before one door opens, others often close. Before a new opportunity appears, certain chapters must end. This process can feel confusing while it is happening. But many people later discover that those uncomfortable moments were actually guiding them towards something better, toward a path they would never have discovered otherwise. And that is why signs are so important. They prepare your mind, they prepare your heart, they create a sense of awareness that something meaningful may be approaching. So when the opportunity finally appears, you are not completely surprised. You are ready to recognize it. You are ready to consider it. You are ready to respond. And sometimes those signs appear in very simple ways. A message that appears repeatedly, a topic that keeps showing up in your life, a sense of curiosity that you cannot fully explain. Even the fact that you are here, listening to this message right now, may feel unusual to you. Perhaps you were not even planning to watch something like this today. Perhaps you simply came across it by accident. But sometimes what we call accidents are actually moments of alignment. Moments where something gently pulls our attention in a direction we did not expect. Because awareness always comes before transformation. First you notice something, then you begin to think about it. Then slowly, your understanding begins to expand, and that is exactly what is happening right now. You are becoming aware of a possibility, a situation that may have deeper meaning than it first appeared. And awareness is powerful, because once you see something, you cannot completely unsee it. Once a possibility enters your mind, it begins to influence the way you look at the future. It opens space for new questions, new ideas, new paths. But awareness alone is not enough. At some point, awareness leads to a choice, and choices shape the direction of our lives, which leads us to the next part of this story. Because while signs may prepare you for a moment, there is something else that often determines whether the moment becomes real. A decision. A moment where you must decide whether you will move forward or remain where you are. And the decision connected to this situation may be closer than you realize. But before we continue, take a moment to remember something important. Sometimes the signs that seem small today are actually preparing you for opportunities that could change the direction of your life tomorrow. A quiet invitation before the next chapter. If this message is resonating with you, there is something special I want to share with you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many people in this community describe it as a spiritual revelation about prosperity, purpose, and the way God can guide financial transformation. Think of it as a gift that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive it. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to enter a more exclusive space within this channel. In that space, I share messages, reflections, and spiritual insights that are not made public. Some people choose to stay in the open community. Others feel called to step into that closer spiritual circle and receive those reserved messages. If you feel curious about it, simply take a moment later and open the first pinned comment. Everything you need will be waiting there. Why this opportunity? Almost passed you by. There is a quiet truth about life that many people only realize after years have passed. The greatest opportunities rarely disappear because they were impossible. Most of the time, they disappear because they were almost invisible. They arrive quietly. They appear in ordinary moments. They look so simple that many people assume they cannot possibly be important. And because of that assumption, they pass them by. Think about how many times people say phrases like, "I almost answered that call. I almost opened that message. I almost took that opportunity." That single word, almost, has shaped the direction of countless lives. Not because people were careless, not because they lacked intelligence or talent, but because they did not realize the importance of the moment while it was happening. And sometimes, distractions play a powerful role in this. Modern life is filled with noise, notifications, responsibilities, stress, endless information competing for attention every single day. In that environment, it becomes very easy to overlook something meaningful. Your attention moves from one thing to another. Your mind focuses on immediate concerns, bills, work, family responsibilities, plans for tomorrow. And while you are focused on all of those things, something unexpected may quietly appear. A message, an opportunity, a connection. But because your mind is occupied, you may not immediately recognize its significance. You might tell yourself, "I'll look at that later. I'll think about it tomorrow. It's probably nothing important." And that is how many doors quietly close. Not with dramatic endings, but with quiet neglect, with moments of hesitation, with small delays that seem harmless at first. But there is another reason opportunities sometimes pass people by. Doubt. Doubt has a powerful voice. When something unexpected appears, doubt immediately begins asking questions. Why would this happen to me? This must be a mistake. People like me don't experience things like this. Those thoughts can feel very convincing, because many people carry invisible limits inside their minds. Limits shaped by past experiences. Limits shaped by disappointments. Limits shaped by the belief that certain kinds of success or transformation are meant only for others. But here is something important to understand. Opportunities do not always appear for people who feel ready. Sometimes they appear for people who simply notice them. People who are willing to pause and consider that maybe, just maybe, life is offering them something unexpected. And that may be exactly what is happening right now. Because this situation has already moved through several stages. Your name appeared in a place where no one expected it. Curiosity grew around your story. Interest began to develop, and attempts were made to reach you. But during that process, there were moments when the connection could have disappeared completely. Moments when messages might not have arrived. Moments when attention might have shifted elsewhere. Moments when the opportunity might have quietly moved on. And yet somehow, the path remained open. The message continued traveling. The curiosity continued growing. The possibility continued moving forward. Until finally, it reached you. That is why this moment matters. Because awareness has finally been established. You now know that something unusual has been unfolding behind the scenes. You now know that there are people who became interested in your story. You now know that a connection has been forming that no one expected. And awareness creates a new situation. Because once you know something, you are no longer standing in the same place you were before. You are standing at the edge of a choice. Not a dramatic choice. Not a decision that must be made in panic or pressure. But a quiet decision. A decision about attention. A decision about openness. A decision about whether you will remain curious about what may be unfolding in front of you. Or whether you will return to the assumption that nothing meaningful is happening. And that is where many people face their most important internal moment. The moment where they decide whether they will believe that their life can still change in ways they never expected. Because sometimes the greatest barrier between a person and their next chapter is not external circumstances. It is the belief that nothing extraordinary could ever happen to them. But history has proven something different. Many of the most powerful transformations in life began with ordinary people who were simply willing to stay open to the possibility of something greater. And that is exactly where this story continues. Because once the connection between you and this family became clearer, something even more important began to emerge. A moment where a decision would need to be made. A decision that could shape the direction of everything that happens next. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next chapter. But before we continue, remember this. Sometimes the greatest opportunities in life come dangerously close to passing us by, simply because we almost ignored them. A quiet invitation. Before the next chapter. If something in this message has touched your heart, there is something special waiting for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity, according to God's plan. Many people in this community describe it as a powerful spiritual insight about how faith and financial prosperity can align with God's purpose. Think of it as a message that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive it. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive part of this channel. In that space, I share spiritual messages, reflections, and deeper guidance that are not posted publicly. It is a place for those who feel called to walk a little closer on this spiritual journey. If your heart feels curious about it, simply open the first pinned comment and you will find everything there. The decision that will change your future. Every meaningful turning point in life eventually leads to a moment of decision. Not always a loud decision. Not always a dramatic one. Sometimes it is quiet, almost invisible to everyone except the person experiencing it. But that quiet decision can shape the direction of everything that follows. Many people imagine that life changes only through massive actions or sudden events. Yet when we study the stories of those whose lives transformed unexpectedly, a pattern appears. Before the breakthrough, before the opportunity, before the doors opened, there was a moment where they simply decided not to ignore what was happening. They decided to pay attention. They decided to stay open. They decided to explore the possibility that something meaningful was unfolding. And those decisions often felt small in the moment. But later they realized those were the moments that changed everything. You see, the path of life is rarely controlled by one giant choice. Instead, it is shaped by a series of small decisions that slowly move us in a certain direction. A decision to listen instead of dismiss. A decision to explore instead of ignore. A decision to believe that perhaps your story is not finished yet. Right now, you may be standing inside one of those moments. Not because someone is forcing you, not because there is pressure, but because awareness has entered your life. You now know that somewhere beyond your immediate world, a situation has been forming. A family with wealth and influence has shown interest in your story. Questions have been asked, connections have been explored, attempts to reach you have been made, and now the information has finally reached your awareness. This is where the decision begins, because awareness always leads to a crossroads. One path is familiar. It is the path of dismissal, the path where you tell yourself, this is probably nothing. It doesn't matter. Things like this don't happen to people like me. Many people choose that path because it feels safe. It requires no change, no emotional risk, no shift in perspective. But there is another path, a quieter one. A path where you allow curiosity to exist, where you allow the possibility that life may still hold surprises you never expected. Choosing that path does not mean blindly believing everything you hear. It simply means allowing yourself to remain open to the idea that something meaningful could be unfolding, open to the possibility that this moment may not be random, open to the understanding that sometimes life presents opportunities that do not make sense until later. Because the truth is, the most transformative moments in life rarely arrive with perfect clarity. They arrive with mystery, with uncertainty, with questions. And those who experience transformation are often the ones who have the courage to move forward, even when everything is not fully explained yet. But there is another layer to this decision, a spiritual layer. Because throughout history, many people have believed that certain opportunities appear when a person is ready to step into a new chapter of their life. Not necessarily because they planned it, but because their character, their experiences, and their perseverance have quietly prepared them for it. Sometimes those preparations happen through challenges, moments where life tests your patience, moments where you are forced to grow stronger than you ever expected, moments where your faith is tested. During those periods, it can feel as if nothing meaningful is happening. But in reality, those seasons are often shaping the person you are becoming, preparing you for moments that require wisdom, humility, and strength. And when those moments finally arrive, they often look very different from what you imagined. They do not always appear in the form you expected. They may arrive through people you have never met, through opportunities you never planned, through situations that seem mysterious at first. But when you look back later, you begin to see how every part of your journey prepared you for that moment. Perhaps that is why this message feels unusual. Perhaps that is why you are still listening. Because something inside you senses that this moment deserves your attention. Not because of promises, not because of guarantees, but because awareness has been placed in front of you. And awareness creates possibility. The real power of this moment is not about wealth or influence alone. It is about the realization that your story may still contain chapters you have not yet discovered. And sometimes the only thing required to begin a new chapter is a simple decision: to remain open, to remain curious, to remain willing to explore what life may be placing in front of you. And that decision can quietly reshape your future. Because once you choose openness instead of dismissal, the next steps of the story begin to reveal themselves. And the next step in this story becomes even more intriguing. Because while you are now becoming aware of this situation, there is also something this family wants you to understand. A message they hoped would eventually reach you. A message that carries meaning far beyond wealth. And that is exactly what we will explore next. But before we continue, remember something important. The moments that change our lives often begin with a single decision. The decision to pay attention. A quiet invitation before the next chapter. If this message has resonated with you in some way, there is something special I want you to know. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide titled 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many people who opened it described it as a spiritual revelation about how faith, wisdom, and financial prosperity can align according to God's purpose. Think of it as a gift that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive that message. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also find an invitation to step into a more exclusive space of this channel. In that space, I share spiritual messages, deeper reflections, and guidance that are not posted publicly. It is a place for those who feel called to walk closer on this spiritual journey and receive messages reserved for members. If you feel curious about it, simply take a moment later and open the first pinned comment. Everything you need will be waiting there. What this family wants you to know. When people hear about wealth, influence, or powerful families, their minds often jump immediately to one idea: money. But in many cases, the most important things wealthy families try to pass on are not financial at all. They are lessons, experiences, wisdom gathered over years, sometimes over generations. Because people who have lived through cycles of success, loss, rebuilding, and growth often come to understand something important. Money alone does not define a legacy. What defines a legacy is what you choose to do with the influence you have been given. And that realization is exactly what shaped the message this family wanted to send. When they first became curious about your story, they were not searching for someone perfect. They were not searching for someone famous. They were not even searching for someone who already possessed wealth. What they were interested in was something far more rare: character. Because character is something that cannot be purchased, inherited, or manufactured. It is built slowly through experiences, through struggles, through moments where life forces you to make difficult choices. People who have managed large amounts of wealth for many years often say something surprising. They say that finding people with genuine integrity and resilience is far more valuable than finding people who simply desire money. Why? Because money amplifies the character that already exists. If someone has wisdom, money expands their ability to create positive impact. If someone has generosity, money expands their ability to help others. But if someone lacks those qualities, money simply amplifies the problems that already existed. That is why many families with influence become extremely selective about who they trust and about who they invite into their circles. And according to what has been revealed, when this family continued learning about your story, they began to see something that caught their attention: resilience. The ability to continue moving forward, even when life presented obstacles. Moments where giving up might have seemed easier, but you continued anyway. Moments where circumstances tested your patience, your strength, and perhaps even your faith. Those moments rarely feel important while they are happening. But when people look at them from the outside, they reveal something powerful about the person who lived through them. They reveal endurance. They reveal humility. They reveal the ability to grow through difficulty. And those qualities often stand out more than any financial achievement. Because people who have already experienced wealth understand something many others do not. Money alone cannot build those qualities. Life builds them, and life often builds them through challenges. That is why your story created curiosity. Because somewhere along the path of your life, the way you handled certain situations left an impression. Perhaps on someone who later shared that story. Perhaps on someone who remembered your character. Perhaps on someone who believed your journey was still unfolding. And when that impression reached this family, it raised an important thought. What if this person's story is not finished yet? What if their future holds something greater than their current circumstances suggest? What if they are standing at the beginning of a chapter they never expected? Questions like that can lead to something powerful. An intention to reach out. An intention to connect. An intention to see what possibilities might emerge. But the message they wanted to send carries something deeper than opportunity. It carries a reminder that your story still matters. That your past struggles were not meaningless, that your perseverance has been seen, even in places you never imagined. And sometimes, hearing something like that can change the way a person sees themselves. Because many people walk through life believing that their efforts go unnoticed, believing that their struggles are invisible, believing that their journey is insignificant. But occasionally, life reveals something surprising. Someone noticed, someone remembered. Someone recognized something valuable in your story, and that realization can awaken something powerful inside a person. A renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of possibility, a renewed sense that perhaps the next chapter of their life may look very different from the previous one. And that brings us to something important, because when moments like this appear, they often carry a deeper spiritual lesson. A lesson about attention, a lesson about awareness, a lesson about recognizing the moments when life quietly invites you to step into something new. But before we move forward, I want to ask you something. Take a moment and write something in the comments. Even if it is just one word. Write, I'm ready for my next chapter. Sometimes speaking something out loud, or even writing it, can create a powerful shift in the way we see our own future. And your comment may also encourage someone else who is listening right now and wondering if their life can change too. Now let's continue, because the next part of this story becomes even more important. There is a spiritual test hidden inside moments like this, a test that many people fail without even realizing it. A test about belief, attention, and the willingness to recognize when life is offering something meaningful. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next chapter. But before we continue, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful messages we receive are not about what others want from us. They are reminders of who we are capable of becoming. Before we continue, if this message is resonating with your heart, there is something special waiting for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many people in this community say it helped them discover a deeper spiritual understanding of prosperity, purpose, and God's guidance in financial life. Think of it as a gift that has been opened for those who feel ready to receive it. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive part of this channel, a place where I share messages, spiritual reflections, and guidance that are not made public. It is a closer space for those who want to walk more deeply on this spiritual journey. If you feel curious about that, simply open the first pinned comment and you will find everything there. And before we continue to the next chapter, write something in the comments. You can simply write, "I'm open to what God is preparing for me." Your comment may inspire someone else who is listening right now and wondering if their own life is about to change too. The spiritual test behind this moment. There are moments in life that look ordinary on the surface, but carry a deeper meaning beneath them. Moments that quietly reveal something about the person experiencing them. Not to judge them, not to pressure them, but to reveal what is already inside their heart. Many spiritual teachers throughout history have spoken about these moments as tests. Not the kind of test you find in a classroom, but the kind that reveals whether a person is ready to step into the next chapter of their life. And interestingly, these tests rarely look dramatic. They often appear as simple situations that ask one quiet question. Will you recognize the moment placed in front of you, or will you overlook it? Because sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as something ordinary. A conversation, a message, a connection, an unexpected opportunity. And the test is not about perfection. It is about awareness. It is about whether your mind and heart are open enough to notice when something meaningful appears. Many people fail these moments without even realizing it. Not because they are bad people, not because they lack intelligence, but because life has trained them to expect disappointment. Over time, repeated struggles can quietly plant a belief inside someone's mind, a belief that says, "Nothing extraordinary ever happens to me." When that belief becomes strong enough, it creates a powerful filter. Even when opportunities appear, the mind rejects them immediately. This can't be real. This isn't meant for me. This must be for someone else. And when those thoughts take control, the opportunity fades away before the person ever truly explores it. That is why spiritual awareness matters so much. Awareness allows you to pause before dismissing something. Awareness allows you to consider that perhaps this moment deserves a closer look. Awareness allows you to remain open long enough to discover whether something meaningful is truly unfolding. And that is exactly the kind of moment you may be experiencing right now. A moment that invites you to pay attention. A moment that asks you to consider the possibility that your life is still full of chapters waiting to unfold. But spiritual tests also reveal something else. They reveal whether a person is willing to grow beyond the limits of their past. Because every human being carries invisible boundaries formed by past experiences. Moments of rejection, moments of loss, moments where plans did not unfold the way we hoped. Over time, those experiences can quietly shape the way we see the future. They can create the belief that life will always repeat the same patterns. But sometimes, life presents a moment that challenges that belief. A moment that gently asks, what if your story is not finished yet? What if the next chapter looks different from everything that came before it? Those questions can feel uncomfortable at first. Because accepting the possibility of change requires courage. It requires the willingness to imagine a future that does not look exactly like the past. But that courage is often the key to transformation. because the future rarely reveals itself fully before we take the first step of belief. Instead, it reveals itself gradually, one realization at a time, one opportunity at a time, one moment of awareness at a time. And that is why the moment you are experiencing right now carries spiritual significance. Not because it guarantees a specific outcome, but because it invites you to shift your perspective, to recognize that your life may still contain possibilities you have not yet discovered. And when a person begins to see life through that lens, something powerful happens. They stop living only according to the limitations of yesterday. They begin to imagine what tomorrow might hold. And imagination is often the first step toward transformation. But there is another layer to this spiritual test, a layer that many people overlook. It is the test of gratitude. Gratitude does not mean pretending that life has always been easy. It means recognizing that every experience, even the difficult ones, may have been shaping you for something greater. The struggles taught you resilience. The challenges taught you patience. The disappointments taught you humility. And those qualities often become the very things that prepare someone for opportunities they never expected. Because people who carry those qualities know how to handle change with wisdom. They know how to move forward without losing their integrity. They know how to grow without forgetting where they came from. And those are the kinds of people who are often ready when new chapters begin. Which brings us to something important. Moments like this do not last forever. They appear. They invite awareness, and then they move forward depending on the choices people make. That is why paying attention matters. Because sometimes the difference between a missed opportunity and a life-changing one is simply the willingness to remain present when the moment arrives. And perhaps that is exactly what you are doing right now. You are paying attention. You are listening. You are allowing yourself to explore the possibility that something meaningful may be unfolding. And that is often the first step toward recognizing the blessings that life places in front of us. But the next chapter reveals something even more serious. Because there is a reason why moments like this carry urgency. A reason connected to what can happen if a person completely ignores a moment that was meant for them. And understanding that truth may change the way you see everything that is happening right now. But before we continue, take a moment and write something in the comments. Write, "I will not ignore the opportunities God places in my path." Your words may encourage someone else who is listening right now and wondering whether they should pay attention to the moments appearing in their own life. Before we continue, if this message has touched your heart, there is something special waiting for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide titled 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many people who opened it said they discovered a deeper spiritual understanding of how faith, purpose, and financial prosperity can align according to God's plan. Think of it as a gift that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive it. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive space within this channel. A place where I share spiritual messages, reflections, and guidance that are not posted publicly. It is a closer circle for those who want to grow deeper in faith and spiritual awareness. If you feel drawn to that, simply open the first pinned comment and you will find everything waiting for you there. And before we continue, take a moment to write in the comments, "I am ready for the blessings God is preparing." Your comment may inspire someone else who needs to hear that their life can still change too. What could happen if you ignore this call? There is a quiet reality about life that many people only understand when it is already too late. Not every opportunity returns. Some moments appear only once. They arrive quietly, almost gently, and then they move on. Not because they were meant to punish anyone, but because life is always moving forward, and opportunities move with it. Think about the stories people share years later. Stories filled with phrases like, "I remember when that chance appeared. I almost pursued it. I thought about it, but I waited too long." And the sentence that often follows is the one that carries the most weight. "I wish I had taken it seriously." Regret is a powerful teacher, but it is also one of the most painful ones. Because regret is not about failure. Failure can teach you. Failure can make you stronger. Regret, however, is different. Regret is the realization that something meaningful was placed in front of you, and you never gave it the attention it deserved. That is why moments like this carry a quiet sense of urgency. Not urgency driven by fear, but urgency driven by awareness. The awareness that certain doors in life do not remain open forever. Imagine someone knocking on a door. They knock once. They wait. Perhaps they knock again. But eventually, if no one answers, they assume the house is empty, and they move on. Opportunities behave in a similar way. They appear. They wait. They give a small window of time for recognition, and then they continue their path. This is not something meant to create anxiety. It is simply the natural rhythm of life, because life cannot remain paused forever. New moments appear. New paths unfold. New stories begin. And sometimes the only difference between the people who experience transformation and the people who remain where they are is a single decision. The decision to pay attention. To pause long enough to explore whether a moment carries deeper meaning. Right now, you are standing inside such a moment. Not because someone forced you, but because awareness has been placed in front of you. You now know that something unusual has been unfolding behind the scenes. You now know that your story has captured the attention of people you never expected. You now know that a connection may exist that no one originally planned, and that awareness changes everything. Because once awareness exists, a new responsibility appears. The responsibility to decide what you will do with the moment. Some people respond with curiosity. They remain open. They explore the possibilities that life may be presenting. Others respond with hesitation. They delay. They postpone. They assume there will always be another moment later. But sometimes later never arrives in the same way again. History is filled with stories of people who recognized a moment when it appeared. Moments where logic alone could not fully explain what was happening. Moments where something deeper told them to pay attention. Those who listened often found themselves stepping into chapters of life they never expected. But those who ignored those moments often continued on the same path they had always known. Neither path is inherently wrong, but one path leads to exploration. The other leads to familiarity. And sometimes the difference between the two is simply the willingness to believe that your story may still contain unexpected possibilities. But there is another important truth hidden inside this chapter. Ignoring a moment does not always feel dramatic. Most of the time it feels ordinary. Life simply continues. Days pass, weeks pass. The moment fades into the background, until one day, you remember it. You remember that there was a time when something unusual appeared in your life. A message, a connection, a possibility, and you wonder what might have happened if you had explored it further. That is the quiet nature of missed opportunities. They rarely announce themselves when they disappear. They simply become part of the past. But awareness changes that. Awareness gives you the chance to recognize a moment before it becomes a memory. And that is exactly where you are right now. Inside a moment of awareness. A moment where your attention has been drawn to something unexpected. A moment that invites you to remain curious about what may be unfolding. And curiosity is powerful, because curiosity leads to exploration. Exploration leads to discovery, and discovery often leads to transformation. But the next chapter reveals the most hopeful part of this story, because while ignoring opportunities can lead to regret, recognizing them can lead to something far more powerful. A blessing, a shift, a new chapter that changes the direction of a person's life. And that is exactly what we will explore next. But before we continue, take a moment and write something in the comments. Write, "I will not ignore the opportunities meant for me." Sometimes declaring something out loud, even through a comment, strengthens the way you see your own future. And your words might encourage someone else listening right now, who is wondering whether they should pay attention to the moments appearing in their life. Before we continue, if this message is speaking to your heart, there is something I want you to know. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide called 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity, according to God's plan. Many people in this community describe it as a spiritual revelation that helped them see prosperity, faith, and purpose in a completely new way. Think of it as a gift that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive that message. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive space of this channel. In that space, I share spiritual insights, reflections, and messages that are not available publicly. It is a closer circle for those who want to grow deeper in faith and spiritual awareness. If you feel drawn to that, simply open the first pinned comment and everything will be waiting there for you. And before we move to the next chapter, write this in the comments. I am ready for the blessings God is preparing. Your comment may inspire someone else who needs to hear that their own life can still change. The blessing that may be waiting for you. There is something fascinating about the way blessings appear in life. Rarely do they arrive in the form people expect. Most of the time, when people imagine a blessing, they imagine something dramatic. A sudden miracle. A loud announcement. An obvious change that everyone can see immediately. But in reality, blessings often begin quietly. They start as small shifts, small realizations, small moments where a new possibility appears in front of someone who never imagined it would. At first, it may not look like a blessing at all. It may look like curiosity. It may look like a conversation. It may look like a connection that slowly begins to grow. Only later, when the full picture becomes visible, do people realize that the moment they almost ignored was actually the beginning of something extraordinary. And that may be exactly what is unfolding around you right now. Not a guarantee, not a promise written in stone, but a possibility. A possibility that your story is entering a new chapter. A chapter where things that once seemed distant begin to move closer. A chapter where doors that once seemed closed begin to open quietly. Because life has a mysterious way of rewarding perseverance. People who continue moving forward despite setbacks often develop something powerful inside them. Perspective, humility, wisdom. They understand the value of opportunity because they know what it feels like to struggle without it. They understand the value of stability because they remember what uncertainty felt like. And those qualities often prepare someone for moments of growth. Moments where their life begins to expand beyond the limits they once believed defined them. Sometimes that expansion appears through relationships. Sometimes through opportunities. Sometimes through connections that bring new paths into view. And sometimes those connections arrive through people whose lives look very different from our own. People who have resources. People who have influence. People who have the ability to open doors that once seemed impossible to reach. But what truly matters in those moments is not the wealth itself. It is the alignment of purpose. When someone with resources recognizes potential in someone else's journey, something powerful can happen. Possibilities multiply. Paths widen. Ideas that once seemed unrealistic suddenly become reachable. And that is why moments like this can feel so important. Because they carry the potential to reshape the direction of someone's life. Not through magic, but through opportunity. Through guidance. Through the meeting of two paths that were never expected to cross. But blessings also come with responsibility. Because when new opportunities appear, they often require growth. Growth in perspective. Growth in character. Growth in the way someone sees their own future. Sometimes the hardest part of receiving a blessing is believing that you are ready for it. Many people struggle with that moment. They question themselves. They wonder whether they deserve the opportunity. They wonder whether they are capable of stepping into something greater. But history has shown something again and again. People grow into the opportunities they receive. They learn. They adapt. They develop the strength needed to handle the next chapter of their journey. Because growth does not happen before the opportunity appears. Growth happens as you step into it. And perhaps that is why this moment feels so meaningful. Because it invites you to imagine a future that may look different from the past. It invites you to recognize that the story of your life may still be unfolding in ways you have not yet discovered. But imagination alone is not enough. Belief must follow. Belief that your path is not limited to what you have experienced so far. Belief that new chapters can begin even when life once felt predictable. Belief that the same God who guided you through past struggles can also guide you toward new opportunities. And sometimes that belief begins with something simple. A shift in perspective. A willingness to say, my story is not finished yet. If you feel that in your heart right now, take a moment and write something in the comments. Write, my story is just beginning. Your words may inspire someone else listening who has been quietly wondering whether their life can still change. Because the truth is, transformation often begins with a single moment of belief. And belief opens the door to possibilities that logic alone cannot fully explain. But before this message comes to its conclusion, there is one final thing you need to hear. One final reminder that may change the way you see everything that has been said so far. Because the most important message is not about a wealthy family. It is not about money. It is not even about opportunity. The most important message is about what God may be preparing in your life. and that is exactly what we will reveal in the final chapter. Before we continue, if this message has spoken to your heart, there is something special waiting for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide titled 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity, According to God's Plan. Many people in this community describe it as a powerful spiritual revelation about how faith, purpose, and financial prosperity can align in God's plan. Think of it as a gift that has been opened for those who feel ready to receive it. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive space of this channel. In that space, I share messages, reflections, and spiritual guidance that are not posted publicly. It is a closer circle for those who want to grow deeper in faith and spiritual awareness. If you feel drawn to that, simply open the first pinned comment and everything will be waiting for you there. And before we move to the final chapter, write this in the comments. My story is just beginning. Your comment may encourage someone else who needs to believe that their own life can still change. God's final message for you today. After everything you have heard in this message, there is one final truth that needs to be understood. Because the heart of this story was never truly about a wealthy family. It was never only about influence. And it was never only about opportunity. Those things may be part of the story, but they are not the center of it. The true center of this moment is something deeper. Awareness. Awareness that your life may still be unfolding in ways you cannot yet fully see. Awareness that moments of possibility often appear when we least expect them. Awareness that the same God who carried you through past struggles is still guiding your steps today. Sometimes people believe that God only moves through dramatic miracles. But many times, divine guidance appears through quiet moments. A message that reaches you at the right time. A realization that changes the way you see your future. A connection that begins to form between paths that once seemed completely unrelated. These moments do not force themselves into your life. They simply appear and invite you to notice them. And that is what makes awareness so powerful. Because once awareness appears, your perspective begins to change. You begin to see your story differently. You begin to realize that your past may have been preparing you for something greater. Think about everything you have experienced so far in your life. The challenges, the disappointments, the seasons where it felt like nothing was moving forward. At the time, those moments may have felt confusing, even painful. But many people later discover that those very experiences shaped them into the person they needed to become. They built resilience, they built patience, they built faith. And those qualities often become the foundation for the next chapter of someone's life. Because opportunities are not only about circumstances, they are also about readiness. Readiness of the mind, readiness of the heart, readiness of the spirit. And sometimes when a person has been quietly growing through life's challenges, the moment arrives where new doors begin to appear. Doors that once seemed impossible. Doors that once felt far beyond reach. But suddenly those doors begin to move closer. And the person standing in front of them begins to realize something incredible. They are not the same person they once were. They are stronger, wiser, more aware, and more capable of stepping into the next chapter of their life. Perhaps that is the deeper message behind everything you have heard today. Not that something extraordinary will happen overnight, but that your story is not finished. Your future is not limited to what you have already experienced. Your path is still unfolding, and sometimes, the first step toward that new chapter is simply recognizing that the possibility exists. Recognizing that God may still be working in ways you cannot yet see. Recognizing that the moments appearing in your life right now may carry meaning that will only become clear later. Because the most powerful transformations in life rarely begin with certainty. They begin with awareness, with belief, with the willingness to remain open to what God may be preparing. And if something in this message has touched your heart today, take a moment and write something in the comments. Write, "I trust the path God is preparing for me." Your words may encourage someone else who is listening right now and wondering whether their own life still holds unexpected blessings. Sometimes the greatest impact we have is simply reminding someone else that their story is not finished. And before we finish, there is something important I want to leave with you. Sometimes knowledge arrives at the exact moment we are ready to receive it. And if this message resonated with you, there is something special waiting for you. In the first pinned comment, you will find access to a guide titled 5 Spiritual Steps to Achieve Financial Prosperity According to God's Plan. Many people in this community have said that reading it helped them understand prosperity in a completely different way. Not just as money, but as alignment between faith, purpose, and wise decisions. Think of it as a gift that has been made available for those who feel ready to receive that message. And in that same first pinned comment, you will also see an invitation to step into a more exclusive space of this channel. In that space, I share spiritual messages, reflections, and insights that are not released publicly. It is a closer circle for those who want to grow deeper in faith and spiritual awareness. If you feel called to explore that, simply open the first pinned comment and everything will be waiting there. And before you leave this message today, take a moment and write one final comment. I trust the path God is preparing for me. Your words may be exactly what someone else needed to read today. Remember this: your story is still unfolding. Your path is still being written. And sometimes the most beautiful chapters of life begin exactly when we believe they are impossible. Stay aware, stay open, and keep moving forward with faith.